This is the PlayStation 1 Classic. It's the system that is mostly disappointed at this point, with a lot of reviewers pretty much saying the emulation's bad and it doesn't play like it should. We have PAL games on this thing mixed with NTSC games. It's all over the place. There's an open source emulator running on it. I'm not really sure what happened in production for this system, but a lot of people have already kind of cast it aside and are now looking forward to next year when we could possibly see a Nintendo 64 Classic, maybe a revised PlayStation 1 Classic, maybe a PS2 Classic. Who knows where this market with plug-and-play systems is going, but one thing that's very interesting about this system is it's actually possible that this could become a much more celebrated system down the road. And to look at that, we actually have to open it up, and I can kind of show you where we can see this system going in the future. And as always, if you guys enjoy these teardowns, make sure you do hit the like button. It does help out. We're going to start right away by unboxing it. Now, I want to take also a look at the box if we could here for a second, because I like the way that they kind of made this look like the original box. They also do mark right here, USB AC adapter not included, so you're going to make sure you get one for yourself because, well, you can't really do much without it. Now, on the sides, you have kind of the "Are you ready to play" right there. And on the back, they go over all the different games. But it does feel like the same type of box I would have got back in the day, because back then they would put all of these games all over it that you could buy. It didn't come with it, obviously. It didn't say preloaded, but the 64 did this, the PlayStation 1, the Saturn, the Super Nintendo. They would always put like all of these boxes of games on the back and just show you all this cool stuff that you could buy in this similar grid fashion, actually, at times. Now, of course, newer systems still kind of do that, but this is very, very similar to what you would see. And it does have a mature rating, so I guess technically you have to have an ID to buy this, I guess, because it has things like Metal Gear Solid and stuff on there. All the stuff comes with here, including 2 controllers, a USB cable, and an HDMI cable, and then, of course, the system itself. So let's go ahead and pop this open. It sounds funny to say this, but the box itself is actually really well done. It has like the nice Sony, like where the flaps are all connected there, and it's essentially basically a jacket around the box inside, and that box has the nice PlayStation logo right on it. It's something that Sony does with a lot of their systems, where it's an all white box, then you just have just like the symbol right there. So pretty cool stuff. We now have to open it up, so let's kick this guy open. There we go. And again, very simplistic, very simplistic. PlayStation 1 Classic right in the middle, just covered in plastic. Let me get this guy open. It opens up. And then we can get to our system. Fairly small system, as you would expect. I mean, these minis are generally almost palm size for a lot of people, where you can basically hold it in one hand. And yes, it looks just like the regular PS1. All the buttons function, which is really cool. Of course, the open button makes so you change a disc just by pressing it. Power button, reset button do exactly what you figure, with the reset button taking you back to the menu, and the power button turning it on and off. On the back, HDMI port, micro USB cable there. And that's pretty much about it. Nothing else really to note of here. Unfortunately, that's not actually a thing, I guess, here. I saw this little connector there. That actually would have been kind of funny. But no, not much else. On the front, we have USB connections here and here. And, of course, the memory card doors that are just there for aesthetics. They don't actually do anything. On the bottom, they have these felt pads kind of for the 4 corners so that it doesn't, I guess, scratch up a desk or something if it sits on it. So let's put that to the side and go a little further here into the box. Let's see. This kind of opens up like that. There we go. And we can see right away we got there's a lot of cardboard in this, by the way. Nintendo usually charges for that. This is the micro USB cable for power. How long is this? It's actually something we should be at least somewhat interested in, to see how long the cable is they give you. Now, you want to use a power brick, as they said, that's at least an amp. 5 volt, 1 amp. I recommend just grabbing a 2 amp one off of Amazon. You can usually get them for like $8 prime shipped. And it's better just to go to 2 amps, just to be sure. You never know what could happen in the modding and hacking scene for this thing, whether they overclock stuff or get crazy with it. It's better to just have a little extra, and they don't really cost that much more, so I say why not. This cable is roughly, I'm going to say, about 5 feet. So this cable is about 5 feet, so you'll want to get your own power brick, and it should give you enough room to reach, which should be fine there. 2 controllers, HDMI cable, which again, dime a dozen there. I was curious about these controllers and how they felt. Definitely wanted to see what the quality was on these. Very light. Okay, right off the bat, very light. There's no rumble motors, of course. No DualShock analog sticks. Yes, I remember the originals being very light as well, but these feel even slightly lighter. It might be the plastic actually on it. Buttons feel good. Triggers feel good. Okay, D-pad. Everything else feels really good. So the buttons, nice tactile click kind of as you hear there. Good, good. And then the cable itself, oh, this is going to be another question because a lot of people were wondering, since the Super Nintendo and Nintendo Classic were, they of course had shorter cables. You'd get extensions or whatnot. Let's see, how long is this cable? Because that is gonna concern some people. I'll give you kind of a quick rough estimate on this one. Let's see, it is, how long is that? I'm gonna say about 5 feet. Might be 4. I'm gonna give it an estimate of about 5 feet just to be fair to it. So not terrible. Again, it could have been worse, but back in the day we sat really close to our tube TVs anyway, which was probably bad for us. But yes, that was what we did there. All right, back to the PlayStation 1 Classic. We're gonna start taking this guy apart. I forget these controllers and all this stuff out of the way. I've made a big mess here of cardboard and bags and stuff. Let's see how it measures up against the Super Nintendo Classic. See if we can actually see it this time. Sometimes you can't on this guy. So we're gonna see if we can get a good measurement on this guy. Let me go to grams. There we go. 0. If I kind of move it up, there we go. Okay, so you can guys see it from there. The camera doesn't like that, but I'll read out the weight to you guys so you can see how much it weighs. This is our Super Nintendo Classic. There we go. I have 190 grams on the Super Nintendo Classic, and the PlayStation 1 Classic is 163 grams. So the Super Nintendo Classic actually weighs a bit more than the PlayStation Classic, which is very impressive because the hardware in the PlayStation Classic is a fair amount better than what is in the Super Nintendo Classic. So that's actually really cool that it's that much lighter. All right, so let's start getting this guy apart. All Phillips head screws on the back. They're kind of sharper ones, so you want to get a screwdriver that can grip it. You definitely won't need a wide driver. You'll need one that's kind of fine on the end for it to grab these screws. But on the bottom, they only have 5 of them here. And then it's kind of upside down mounted inside to the top of the system, of the shell. But after that, we're in. So yeah, these plug-and-play systems don't take much to get apart. They're usually pretty quick. Like I'm basically just about open at this point with just a couple screws coming out. All right, all the screws out of the bottom. This opens up, goes to the side, and we have our board here. Again, kind of, it's mounted right side up, but it is screwed kind of to the top through the bottom. So a couple more screws here. So that makes a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. 9 screws to get in and get the board out, which is actually pretty good overall. Okay, all the screws out, and it flips over. We get a similar heatsink to actually what's in the Super Nintendo and Nintendo Classic. Remember that had a very large kind of aluminum style heatsink that just sits there. That's the one nice thing about these. If people ask why do people hack it, why would they want this to be like a media device? Why do people get the Raspberry Pi, for example, things like that? It's because it's silent. It doesn't use a fan. Right? It's actually passively cooled, which is nice. This is actually, should pop off after some wiggling. Does have a thermal pad there for transferring heat. And then we can, let me get this guy off, we can start looking directly at the board itself, which is interesting because this is technically the most powerful plug and play that is on the market now. Of course, pending a possible Nintendo 64 Classic next year. This could be the hardware I guess that Nintendo could use with a smaller flash chip. Okay, so a lot to go over here with the main board. You see a picture of it here. It's using a MediaTek MT8167A. When I took it apart, it was so hard to read the chip because I guess the thermal pad had rubbed off the writing on the top. It was still kind of there, but I had to take a picture, zoom in, and then up the contrast to read the chip. It was a real pain to do that, by the way. But it uses a quad-core ARM Cortex A35 at 1.5 gigahertz. It's paired with a PowerVR GE8300 GPU that's integrated into that chipset. And what's interesting about this chipset, it has a lot of features. It does actually support things like USB Type-C. It also supports DDR4 memory. This is actually using DDR3 memory though on this board. But it's interesting that this chip is actually capable of a lot more than what's here. Now, what's also interesting is it is paired with 1 gigabyte of DDR3. Those are those 2 chips directly to the right, as you're seeing in this picture of the main chipset. and those are two 512 megabyte chips on each side. That's a lot larger than what's found in the Super Nintendo and Nintendo Classic. Remember we did a video on that? Those have 256 megabytes of DDR3, so this has 4 times the amount of RAM, and it still struggles, which is very weird. It's struggling to play these PlayStation 1 classic games, and it shouldn't be having a hard time playing these classic PlayStation 1 games. It's very, very weird. Now, it's been pointed out that Acer uses this same chip in their tablets, and yes, it is technically a capable chip. It's similar to, say, the A53 that's in the Raspberry Pi 3, but it uses less power, like 68% less power, so it is a very efficient chip, which is good. But the performance that they've put into this is not good, which to me is tied specifically to the emulation, the emulator they used, the software. It's not good. Now, what's really interesting about this board is the storage. It is using a Samsung eMMC chip that has 16 gigabytes of onboard storage, flash memory. 16 gigabytes is quite a bit of space. Now, the PlayStation 1 games, of course, are a bit larger, but I feel like even 16 gigabytes is a bit of overkill for the games there. And of course, when this does get opened up and people are able to hack it and use it, well, it's going to have plenty of space for all types of ROMs, and the processor itself is strong enough to play a lot of these different games. And of course, it is already set up to do things like understand controllers that are plugged in. And this is going to be a fascinating thing to watch when it does get hacked and opened up, because this is going to be something that I think will be very, very exciting to see when that hacking and homebrew scene takes off. Now, also notice one other odd thing. On the back, they have essentially an unpopulated USB pad and port there. It's very odd because it does run directly to the CPU, and I wonder if that was used during prototyping phase for things like debugging or even designing and programming and running in parallel. I'm not really sure why that's there. I don't know if it would have any effect on the hacking or homebrew scene, if they would ever use that for anything. Remember, we found one similar to in the Super Nintendo Classic, but that one did not run directly as this one seems to the CPU, so it's something to keep an eye on, I guess. Otherwise, all the buttons are soldered directly to the board. It's all tactile, and that's why those clicks on the different buttons, whether it's the power button or the reset button, they all feel pretty good. Also, what's interesting is they use a very similar style to the original PlayStation when it comes to how the button works. So you can technically pop these out and clean these without too much issue if they got all gunked up down the road. Because of course, I'm sure these classic systems will be around for quite a while. The way they're built, there's no moving parts other than the buttons. So these will probably be working for a long time, and I can see the buttons giving out before anything else. So to clean them, very easy. They have some tabs. These would pop right out. You can soak them in some soapy water, and they should clean right off. So good to know. Not much else on the back. Otherwise, I guess we can put this guy back together. And so that is the PlayStation 1 Classic. It's a system that I really can't recommend at this point because, well, for $100, you're getting pretty flawed emulation from an open source emulator, and the game selection just isn't great. However, if you are interested in this for the possibility of the hacking scene exploding around it, my recommendation is to wait. Yes, the hardware in here is obviously interesting to everyone right now in the homebrew scene who is hoping that this thing gets hacked immediately, like now. But it's hard to say what will come of it. Now, the hardware, 16 gigabytes of storage on board, the more efficient, more powerful processor than the Super Nintendo Classic, and 4 times the memory of that is also interesting. Keep in mind, though, this is pretty comparable, at this time anyway, to a Raspberry Pi 3. The Raspberry Pi 3 actually even has, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi built in and everything, so technically it's a bit behind that, but it's really cool looking, and I know people are going to really band around this as they have with the Nintendo and Super Nintendo Classic. It's technically more efficient than a Raspberry Pi. I bet it could run off of a battery bank. I haven't tried it, but I bet it's possible. So my recommendation again is to wait, kind of keep an eye on that, and see if it does explode into something you want to jump into. I think it will be, so I'm excited to get to that point, but I'm not really looking to hang out and play this game much with the current emulation. Guys, again, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button. It does help out. Get subscribed. So we got a bunch more teardowns, some other cool tech waves coming up as well. And I'll see you guys in the next video.